I hope you enjoyed that long 5-minute break. What happened is during the break, I discovered that I wasn't to be finished at 10:30. That was actually the break time. So anyhow, I thought I was looking at my document last night and it said 9 to 10:30. So I thought I had an hour and a half teaching time when really I'm supposed to continue to teach. So hope you enjoyed your break. If you need to, get up, take a walk or whatever, feel free to do that. We'll go close to noon at this time. I kind of rushed Kent on his presentation, but I want to tell you that the books on the table are below my author cost on those. And my goal here, Wayne's shaking his head in the right direction. You know what, like Rethink Your Life sells for $19.99, and so it's the hardbacks are going to be $10. Is that right, Ken? Yeah. And the paperback $5. But like this book here sells for $13.99, so it's $5. And my cost on that is quite a bit more than $5. But my goal is to put them in your hands, so that's why they're here. And this book, Lead to Succeed, actually is a support text for the material that I'm teaching here. We have quite a few copies with us. And so, again, below my actual cost, just to make sure you get them. I'd be glad to sign them up if you want to give them the gifts to leaders in your church. But it's a whole book that's based on Romans 12 that I think you'll enjoy. And send that back to Ken, please. So books are 5 and 10 there, and I really rushed Ken to his announcement thing. We only had a few moments before I had to finish my teaching. So sorry about that, Kent. He is with me, not because I needed someone to drive me here to get me back to Oklahoma City to fly out on Wednesday morning. He is here because he has practically implemented so many of the visionary things that I've shared. And my reputation was, if you go into Stan's office with an idea, you'll leave with 3 things to do. So, Kent was the guy who executed in my leadership arena, much like I did for Maxwell. So I love to have him here as a resource person. So, and I was glad he finished my illustration because I got sidetracked, forgot to finish the 100-year-old story. We had another charter member that lived to be 106. And she actually lived at home for the last 6 months of her life, cooked for herself, everything else. So this is what we're starting to deal with in our church world. Should be aware of it as we get a little older ourselves. Now, I use fire from Peter Fuda's book, Leadership Now, as a metaphor, but the second one he uses is snowball. There have been some winters when we couldn't identify with that, but David and I were talking about how much snow we've all seen, even in Oklahoma City, which has weather typically akin to Dallas or Atlanta. We had snow on the ground probably for 2 solid weeks there at one stretch, and I saw that in West Virginia and Ohio growing up, but never had seen it in Oklahoma City. Usually it melts off quickly. But he uses this metaphor of the snowball, where he talks about how you have a snowball of activity, and that propels change, and it builds momentum. And so the snowball becomes representative of the big mo in leadership. And in our churches, as you well know, that kind of momentum, spiritual momentum, is needed. And it's not just about activity, but it is a good leadership metaphor. The third one he uses is that of a coach. I've written a book that was released recently. I don't think we have any of those with us, but it's called Leader Coach. I wrote it with Larry Gilbert, who co-founded with Elmer Towns Ephesians 4 Ministry, which was also known as Church Growth Institute back there years ago. I really was fascinated by what he had to say about the coaching metaphor, because he said it's not about coaching, it's about being coached from a variety of sources. And so it's not about you coaching people, it's about you being coached. And he uses this metaphor, and he says, and that those sources include colleagues, friends, family, teachers, consultants, and so your leadership is in a real sense in the essence of every person that has coached you or invested in you. Now I'll be over in Ohio, one of my alma maters, Ohio Christian University, in about 3 weeks. My basketball coach will be there, and he always says, surely you're not going to tell that story on me again. But in Leader Coach, I talk about how my coach, I was a sixth man on the team, and he would put me in the game, and when he put me in the game, he would always say 2 things, Toler. Number 1, I want you to find the leading scorer, and fouling, do you foul out? And number 2, whatever you do, don't shoot. I mean, those are the 2 things that he said to me every time I went to the game. And I became very proficient at fouling. Sometimes I'd foul out in 3 minutes, but I would shut the leading scorer down, because my coach said, don't let him come in our house and act like this. And he said, look, I know you won't get high on him, so just bruise his ankles and his knees, but don't let him score, And then the second thing was, you pass great, but do not shoot. And I always had a little interactive with him by saying, well, what happens if they give me a free throw? He said, well, be real careful. Just that kind of conversation. But actually, he coached me up all the time. And even though I only averaged 1.9 per game my senior year, and I had 3 guys on the front lines who averaged 20-some points a game, that undefeated team had to say that at least I got the Hustle Award. And I was part of it. It's kind of fun to watch Oklahoma City Thunder right now, isn't it? And it's interesting how Westbrook has messed with their rhythm the last 2 games. He just absolutely messed them up. Now, they'll be all right. He's a great player. But they found a rhythm, and then he came into it, and they couldn't even find each other on the court. Durant's passing out of bounds, and Westbrook's missing them and all that, and he'll figure it out because he's a gutsy, good player. But everybody has to know their role for team success. But all of us are we're the sum total of all the coaching we've ever had. And so don't forget colleagues, teachers, mentors, friends, and all of that. It's not about you doing the coaching, he says. It is about being coached. Now, the next one that he used, it has appeal to me, but I don't get it because I don't cook. But he uses the metaphor of a chef. And he talks about in that how you move from being an amateur cook to an incredible chef, and that's a journey that some people like to take. My wife watches all the cooking shows. I don't get them, but she does. I mean, I know that she likes recipe books, so I'm always buying recipe books for her. I don't know why we have a kitchen, however, or why we have the recipe books, because we never cook, but it's neat. So how do you move from my brother Terry at Valentine's trying to be very romantic, and he said to his wife Sue, let's go out to eat. Where do you want to go? And Sue said, he said, let's go someplace we haven't been in a long time, in the kitchen. But how do you move in leadership progression? How do you move from being an amateur cook to a master chef? That's a great question. The 5th thing he says in that, using the metaphor analogy, he uses that one of a mask, M-A-S-K, mask. And what he says is very few leaders are willing to take the mask off and be authentic. Point well taken. He says, your life has to shine through all of that in order to be an authentic leader. And so don't be afraid to bare your soul. Now, pastors have to be careful that they don't just rain on everybody's parade by telling their sad story, because that would get you nowhere in a hurry. But the fact is, he is right, and we may be the worst in the church world at wearing the mask. And so he says, great leaders take the mask off. One of the things that I've said over the years, and I'll come back to this a little bit later, to church boards, is I only do 3 things well. And I'm not going to tell you that I do these other things well, nor am I going to try to attempt it. Because I've discovered who I am in the body of Christ and my gifting, and so therefore I'm not going to waste my time every day trying to do things that I am not gifted and equipped to do. Will you let me be who I am in the body of Christ? I certainly will allow you to be that person. My coach taught me a lot about life, you can see, with that, because he said, you foul incredibly well and you pass great, but don't try much more. Okay? Just a lesson in leadership. Now, the next one that he uses, and I never thought I'd ever use this kind of a metaphor for leadership, but he uses a movie, as a leadership metaphor. Now, that little church that I pastored in Newark, Ohio, the Wesleyan church, when I arrived there, the district superintendent told me that they had split as a congregation. The pastor left and took a group of people with him because they objected to the purchase of a film strip projector because it was of the devil. And they were not going to allow a film strip projector to be used in a local church. That's what I went into at age 17. So I never thought I'd use movie, as a leadership metaphor in a Wesleyan circle. It's all changed, hasn't it? But you know what? If you think about it, I'd say if you want to see Wesleyan or Nazarene carnality at best, give them a film strip projector or mimeograph machine to work with. You can give an altar call about any Sunday to get it right, couldn't you? Now, most of you are too young for that, but I'm just simply saying, if you ever try to load one of those babies up and show a Billy Graham film, God bless you. I was just glad when the VCRs came out. When I got to Oklahoma City in '84, VCRs were just coming out. And we had a hard decision in church board meeting. Do you buy a Beta or do you buy VHS? We bought Beta. 6 months later, the tech reminds us we need to make a change, And I watched the progression of that to iPad minis. And then they graded the Wesleyan Investment Foundation to sponsor these notes as well as send one of those. Craig Dunn is an incredible leader. Don't go anywhere else for your lunch. So, blah, blah, blah. Well, listen, they're in it with us in ministry. They took over the loan fund for the Church of the Nazarene, bought our loan fund, healed our sore leg, and they've since loaned to 454 of our churches. It's just been an incredible partnership. And that's the way Wesleyans ought to be. We ought to be connected, and that Global Wesleyan Alliance that we put together is part of a thing that I feel greatest about in terms of my own role as a general superintendent, is helping bring the 18 different Wesleyan persuasion denominations together in this alliance. It is great to have those partnerships, but I never thought, that we'd have iPad minis or computers. I've been through all the word processors, all that, slides, you name it. And yet what he says is, from his analogy of leadership, is that it's sequential. And he talks about how, movies are made and the various scenes. And as you know, you can, purchase a movie either online or DVD or whatever, and it'll allow you to select scenes or whatever. It's an amazing thing. But he's talking about how, leadership is sequential. And that is a powerful, powerful analogy, even if I wanted to say Christian film, So therefore, you can learn from that analogy. And the last one, and the ladies will have to help with this, he uses this leadership metaphor of Russian dolls. And he talks about the journey. Now, Ruth Ann and some of them, Don Marie, all have to help me with this one. But, as I understand Russian dolls, they're stackable. There's always the alpha doll, right, and all that. But it represents that stackable opportunity, represents the leadership journey that we all take. And I think when I talk about your personal value as a leader, and whatever role or sphere of service that God has called you to, you'll understand more clearly how this works. Now, I brought those 7 metaphors into this teaching. I don't have them in a PowerPoint because I'm a reader and a learner, and I think that these are very, very helpful to us in understanding. I think you can pick any one of them. What I know is, in a way, every one of those, they have worked for me at some point. If I look at my leadership over the years, right down to the Russian dolls, if I'm understanding what I'm saying, to be correct, and ladies, talk to me afterwards, because I don't get Russian dolls. I collected elephants pretty well my whole career, but not Russian dolls. So I have been watching the Olympics, and I should have been better at this. Now, your understanding of those metaphors also helps you understand then more clearly how to motivate people. I like every concept because every one involves a journey. And every congregation that I've served in my 40 years of pastoral ministry, and by the way, someone wanted to know what my title was in serving with Maxwell. My title was Associate Pastor. And under that title, I was a college student working on staff with him. I had the responsibility for being a worship leader and choir director, and I was the youth pastor, and I was the bus ministry director. I was in charge of pastoral care. I also had the responsibility to gas his 1972 Ford Pinto, and take his cleaning to the laundry, and he paid me $65 a week to do all of that. So I just basically did everything. So, but that's part of that stackable journey that I've taken. I think I was better with staff because I served in so many different roles. And Ken is a multi-purpose player. My brother Terry worked with me for 25 years before he became a senior pastor, and he has that unique ability to do multiple things. And I really learned over the years that the staff members who've had multiple experiences have more empathy for people in other departments when they've done that. And so I hope I've been a better senior pastor because of it. Now, casting a vision. As we think about leading to succeed visionary principles for pastoral leadership, I believe that creating a vision team is the starting point. And Bernard Bass says that transformational leaders must manage the delivery of the vision. So how do you accomplish that? It is agreeing on process. It's determining the readiness for change. And I get asked all the time about, well, I'm new at a church, what should I do? Well, for the first 6 months, not much. Just preach and love them and get acquainted, or if you're a youth pastor, just build relationships, fine. Build your team. Don't tinker with much because you'll be on the defensive from the get-go. Now I'll talk about change sometime yet today, and I'll talk about that process and the different types of change, and I may be able to help you understand a little bit more because there are times when something has to be done, it has to be done now. But I've always believed that you have to be ready, that you have to determine readiness. You write out your vision statement, you tell your story, you gain buy-in from the team, and you articulate the vision. And I think that telling your story already has caught fire with some people because they've been coming up to me and saying, you know what, that's a lights-on thing for me, helping the church understand its story, because you really build on that. Now, in essence, everything I've been talking about, are you able to see the screen all right? It seems a little brighter back here than it was before. Are you okay with this? Okay. If I had to explain everything that I've been saying for the last maybe 45 minutes or so of teaching this morning, that it all starts, that's good right there. It starts with a base of knowing your mission and your core values. That's where you frame everything that you do. And then it moves to a vision plan and putting the vision team together. And this grid has just been something that I've worked with over the years in conferencing, and when I followed Maxwell around, I've improved it and so forth, and had new graphics. And then you develop goals. I'm not a big not a numbers guy in terms of emphasizing numerical goals. In fact, I co-authored a book with Alan Nelson. It's in 25 print called The 5-Star Church. And it's a fictional account of a pastor of a church who has a member of his church as general manager of a 5-star hotel. And they begin to talk about Deming's leadership principles, TQM, total quality management. And then they discuss, is it Deming goes to church, or is it my utmost for his highest? And obviously they say, well, we could learn from Deming, but it is my utmost for his highest, and the church can take a page from the business community. And by the way, the business community is taking a page from us. Transformational. I mean, transformation is our word, and the world sees it. Stewardship. I talked about this when I did the Give to Live workshop with the Dunn lectures. For those who are present in this room, you'll remember that maybe that stewardship is a word that the marketplace is using and the church is advocating. And I can go on and on about words that belong to us. But one of the things that I say in the book is that you should avoid numerical goals. You ought to have quality goals, because I believe quality begets quantity. It's my view, if you do it right, you do it with excellence, and you have the right approach to the platform and the Spirit of God breathing life into it, the numbers will come. So my view has always been to get it right. Get ready for company. Take care of what you have in terms of the facility. It doesn't matter how small and insignificant it may seem. Get that right before you begin to reach out and try to touch your community. And then you develop your strategies. Now, here's something. I'm gonna give you a little snippet of something that we did as the Board of General Superintendents at our General Assembly. On Sunday morning at General Assembly last summer, we handed out 25,000 cards that had what I'm getting ready to show you on the next 3 or 4 screens here to Nazarenes. And let me tell you why we did it. Because historically, the Board of General Superintendents over 100 years would, adopt a new program that was created and then send it out and encourage people to use the program. And I said, my challenge is that there's only one way to hold district superintendents and local churches accountable. And that is by telling them mission, values, vision, and strategic priorities. And then rather than say, here's a program for you, you say, what are you using to fulfill the overarching view of the leadership of the church? And we got buy-in, and I headed up a committee or team to put this together. And we already had a mission statement that we liked. But I just want to show you the flow of the grid that I just had up a moment ago. And again, you're welcome to the PowerPoint and use it to teach your leaders. But it starts with mission, and the mission of the Church of Nazarene. I'm not trying to indoctrinate you here or sign you up. I'm simply saying this is an example of how leadership needs to work even in the local church. And it starts with you making Christ-like disciples in the nation. So what would I say to a local church? I would say, what do you add to that? And Kent, you helped us with ours at Trinity by, when you follow as pastor, by something like in Oklahoma City and beyond, right? Use the mission statement, but added the city to it and just tweaked it a little bit, rather than trying to write another mission statement for the local church. So this is a good statement, and Kent followed me as pastor there, and so there you have it. Now, the next statement is the vision statement. Remember, mission is a general statement, but vision is specific. So the General Church of the Nazarene said at our General Assembly, and by the way, our General Superintendents preached on each one of these during our services there each evening and on Sunday morning. But the vision was transforming people, communities, and nations. Again, this is a model that you could use in implementation, and this works in the youth ministry of the church, student ministries. It works in children's ministries. Kent would tell you that practically we ask every person in our local church to do just that. Here's the statement. What are you going to do with it in terms of the ministry that you head up? How are you going to lead this ministry as it leads? That's where the accountability comes in, pastors. You have to hold people to it. And it's probably been the genius of my ministry success, because every church that I pastored grew, and substantially for that matter. But transforming people, communities, and nations. Now, values. As Nazarenes, we are Christian, we are holiness, and we're mission. Now, I'm just trying to help you see this. What happens if one of our churches says, well, we don't believe in holiness? Well, take your sorry, no good sign down and go someplace else. It's a test. Microphone on? You're a Wesleyan, you're not holiness? You know, go be a Baptist. I mean, I don't mean that wrong. I love the Baptists. You know? I speak for the General Baptists. I'll be back up here not for long with the General Baptists. And love them to death. Now, there are many. Free will Baptists. I speak to Southern Baptists, so I'm not in an argument with anybody, but I'm just saying, you got to know who you are and be that, and the only way you can call me an accountability is say, look, we're a Christian mission home. So let me tell you what I did all 4 years as a general superintendent. Every ordination service, because the board of general superintendents do all the ordaining. So, you know, I ordained almost 500 during my time as a general superintendent in South America, Africa, and then my USA assignment of districts, which the last 2 years was Southern Nazarene University, the 10 districts on that. I would sit down with them and say, now, what's our mission statement as Church of Nazarene? And if the ordinance couldn't tell me, then I'd say, you've got to know this if you're going to pastor one of our churches. It is to make Christ-like disciples of the nation. Now, and I would ask the district superintendents to prepare them to tell me that. They need to know it. It's a stewardship. It's a sacred trust. And now apply it to the local church. How do pastors live it out? By understanding what Wesleyanism is all about. What are our values? Christian mission holiness. Did we have more at Trinity? Sure did. We had, one of our values is we value the Word of God. You know why there's such a low view of Scripture these days? Because people aren't saying the book's important. The application of Scripture is, I happen to believe it's a guidebook for daily living. I'm sorry, but I haven't lost my way there. I believe the book. It was a Wesleyan Sunday school teacher by the name of Evelyn McFarland when I was 14 years of age that made all 9 of us in the class raise our hands and promise to quote a verse we'd memorized that she had signed to us the week before. And so this morning I looked up to heaven, and I've been doing this for right at 50 years now. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Why did I do that? Because someone said the Word of God is important in your life, and you ought to start the day with the Word of God and have a devotional life. So in other words, we value the Word. We also value corporate worship. You know, you want to know why attendance is so sorrowful in your local church? You don't make it important. You see, now listen to me. People right now will tell me that they're extremely committed and loyal, and they attend 1 in 4. Is this a test? I'm serious. Now you think about how many people in your church that if you could get them all there the same Sunday, you'd have an incredible attendance, wouldn't you? But they think 1 in 4 is really good. But is it? What does my Bible say? What does your Bible say? We should not forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let's encourage one another all the more as we see the day approaching. So Kent would tell you, I had a Toler paraphrase for that. Get your sorry, no good self out of bed and get to church. Get up. Be there. Every time the door's open, unless, when I was a kid in a Wesleyan kid church, we had perfect attendance bins, unless providentially hindered. That meant you better be on your deathbed or you crawl into church. Get there. You know. Measles, mumps, everything else, bring it on, you know. We insisted. I stood in a line when I was a kid in Florida with my parents, you know, waiting to get our attendance report signed so we could get back in church the next Sunday. By the way, Michael pastored the church where A.N. Davis was pastor. He was the one that insisted that we had that sign, and we had to come back with a signed piece of paper saying we were a church in Florida on our vacation. That way we got credit for our perfect attendance band. Wouldn't got anybody ever heard of one now. But what's the point? The point is, if it's a value, people will be there. And if you don't make it a value, you know, then it won't be important to them. What about we value souls? When's the last time someone found Jesus at your place? If you value the souls of the lost, then all of a sudden it will become an extreme missional priority with you. But I'm simply saying, what are your values? Probably in the local church will have more, but we set the tone and we remind those who are being ordained, this is the way it is. And so every general superintendent say, this is how we keep continuity. I could talk about the breakdown of many mainline denominations. And what happened is, at the top, they lost control. And I don't mean it in the sense of dominating people. It is giving direction. And if you don't give direction, people jump on a horse and ride off fiercely in all directions. They cast off restraint, right? Now look at this one. So we came up with 7 strategic priorities. And here's what we said, and we will say to the 80 districts in the United States, as well as the 159 nations of the world where the Church of Nazarene is, we said, these are our 7 connectional or strategic priorities. You need to say this in the local church. So a pastor comes in as pastor-student ministries. These are our priorities. What will you do in terms of support, training, and development of people in the department or realm of the church that you will lead? What will you do to live this out? And Kent will tell you that we were very, very clear at Trinity with all our staff and also the church leaders and those who were appointed to lead or those who were elected to lead, that every year we went through this, and then we had a vision month in January and always unfolded these things. Now, they were somewhat different in our local church, but this is what we handed out at General Assembly, and then we said, we will call every regional director, every pastor, and every district superintendent into accountability on these. We won't tell you what programs to use, but what we will say is, how do you live these priorities out as you lead? So look at them. Meaningful worship. That could include everything from attendance to the style of worship that you have. And by the way, I'm quite aware, having traveled the world in 85 different countries, that musical preferences are different everywhere. Talk about South America. The Brazilians worship differently than people do in Argentina, I found out. You know, and I found out pastoring on the northwest side of Oklahoma City and the southwest side of Oklahoma City, which is 20 miles apart, the musical preferences were different there. But how do you bring them to meaningful worship rather than just sanctify one hymn? You follow me? So how do you spell it out? I don't know. I'm not going to pick your hymnal for you. I know I'll pick your music for you. But let me just say this. If you got 100 million listeners of country music, and they all love country music on the south side of town, you better get a new bandstand if you're trying to put Hillsong or Casting Crowns on. And I don't mean that wrong. I'm just simply saying you have to know who you are dealing with. On the other side, it is exactly the same. You can't put country music sounds on someone who loves, jazz and big bands and all. And so I've always been one to try to understand that and figure it out as it comes to meaningful worship. Theological coherence. Somewhere you have to say, we will not tolerate veering off course. Now, I know this doesn't happen to you and Wesleyans. But one of our general superintendents went into a local Nazarene church and went to Sunday school class of all things. And the teacher was teaching from Watchtower material, Jehovah's Witness material. And didn't know that that's not really a good thing to be doing, Not for Nazarene, You know what you get when you cross a Jehovah's Witness with a Unitarian, don't you? A knock at the door means absolutely nothing. I couldn't tell us when I was a general superintendent. Now that matter, I don't care. But the fact is, if your pastor's not Jehovah's Witness material in a Wesleyan Sunday school or a small group or doing that, I know you all wouldn't do it, but it happens. And so who's paying attention to our theology and don't veer off course on this. This is who we are. That's another reason I appreciated Kevin Myers so much last week saying we invited Wesleyan Nazarenes because this is who we are, and he wasn't ashamed of it. And I've never been ashamed of being holiness. If you are, then either get sanctified or Go someplace else. No? Now, passion evangelism. We can talk about mainliners or anybody else all you want, but if we don't have a passion for souls, our churches are going to be static and will decline. And so we must not lose our zeal. But let me ask you a question. What's your plan? Let me just give you one little thing that I learned from Christianity Today just recently, a survey of 2,500 evangelical churches in America. Here's what they discovered. That 96% of those evangelical churches in America do not have an identifiable witnessing plan in place. Did you hear that? Evangelical churches. That could explain why we're not winning a lot of people to Jesus. It could explain the decline in American churches and in terms of attendance and everything else. If you're not valuing souls, you're not passionate about evangelism. But so let me ask you, what plan do you use? See, I'm going to call you into accountability now, even in a local church. What plan are you using? If you're passionate about evangelism, just let me ask you. Come on, Stan, what's your plan? All right. Well, how about 4 spiritual laws? Well, I don't like that. Well, how about the Roman road? I don't really like that. Well, how about Kennedy evangelism explosion? Well, I don't like that. Well, then how about the ABCs? I don't like that. Well, then I'm like D.L. Moody when the young man said, I don't like your witnessing plan. He said, what plan do you use? He said, I haven't found one I like. Moody said, I like my plan better than your plan. Same regard. Get a plan. And so that's the way, Brother Max, that we felt that we had to start saying, how do you do that in Tri-State? How do you do that in Kentucky and Tennessee? I'm going to be with Brother Marlon here shortly, and I was just with Tom Smith, and a lot of people I grew up with. Daniel Leroy just asked me to come and play. I was always the third baseman on the youth camp softball team. He was a shortstop, and made a good district superintendent over North Carolina. He sent me a deal, wanted me to come and speak. I saw him at the conference last week. But you have to, wherever this is located, wherever you're located, you've got to figure it out. Intentional discipleship. What kind of discipleship material are you using? So you can't ask people to come into leadership in the church and not put something in their hand to disciple. And so there's a multiplicity of material out there. But one of my questions is what tradition does it come out of when you use it? Does it fit Wesleyanism, for example? Because I'm talking to the choir now. So get back to the table and look at all the small group materials and Sunday school materials and everything else there. Some incredible curriculum. And I know one of those commentaries back there, the tenor singer in my college quartet, J. Michael Walters, who's at Houghton College, he wrote one of those commentaries. So that's my favorite commentary in your series. But you know that it comes out of your tradition. The devotional books, everything else. It's interesting, if you take a look at the original On My Utmost for His Highest, and look at where it's gone now, the newer versions, sanctification's hardly found. That's right. And so we have to be on the guard as it relates to theological coherence and discipling people, church development. That's what are we doing about church planting? When I planted a church in Tampa, Florida, sponsored by John Maxwell to go plant the church, I was told by my district superintendent that I also had to plant a church. And we ended up planting 7 churches while I was planting a church that had no people, no property, no money. See, if you don't know any different, you'll do that, won't you? But somewhere we got it, well, you got to have a lot of property, a lot to have money, you got to have a core group, all that. Ain't give me any of that. And I'm happy for everybody that gets that kind of help. But the truth is, it is a calling on your life. And when you go out and plant a Wesleyan church, and you should, then it ought to be a reflection of Wesleyan transformational leadership. When we're developing leaders, the material that we use, what does it look like? And how do we implement it? And then purposeful compassion. Now, we spoke to this one, all these things we spoke to at the General Assembly, but you may not know it, but when the Church of the Nazarene started, Brazil came out of the Methodist movement, and the first General Superintendent of the Church of the Nazarene felt that when Whitney, who was a PhD from USC, when the two of them got together, Whitney gave the name for the Church of the Nazarene because Jesus was an outcast, and he loved the down and outers and the poor, and so that must never be forgotten, that we're constantly giving a cup of cold water in Jesus' name. The Toler brothers are all ordained ministers and in ministry because the Wesleyan Church fed and clothed us, and we saw Jesus in them as they gave a cup of cold water, and their encouragement and prayers, and many of those people who are in other churches these days continue to love us and care for us, and we can never turn our back on the church. And even on a Monday morning when you feel like driving by the church with your resignation all written out and a brown paper bag with a rock and just want to throw it through the stained glass window and never come back, you can't quit, because you know there were people who were compassionate for your soul and loved you and taught you in the class and pointed you to Jesus and encouraged you in your calling and everything else. And so that kind of compassion lives on in my heart, and how can I not turn around and be purposeful in my compassion? So, the qualities then of an effective leader. Number one, it's based on our values and beliefs. Number two, it should motivate people to leave their comfort zone. Number three, it will generate feelings of hope. Knowing where you're going, not just the exact details all the time of the dream, but knowing the track that you're running on. Mission, vision, values, strategic priorities. It generates hopefulness. It gives people that sense that as you leave, there's hope for the church. It also creates openness to change. I've been doing something, what I love about Wesleyans and Nazarenes is we've always believed in women in ministry. Amen. And without apology. My co-pastors in Baileysville, at that little church that I was talking about, 60, at one stretch was Brother and Sister Zufall. And both were incredible leaders and pastors. And so, when I was not even quite a teenager, I had the privilege of having a female pastor. Now, I've been trying lately to read all the books I can get my hands on written by women. It's not that I want to get in touch with my feminine side, but it's just that I want to learn why women are more open to change than men. Do you know why, Don Marie? There's another part of that I want to know, and that is why women become the primary givers in the local church. If you want somebody to give, you better bring the wife or along, or the leading females in the church, because married or not married, they have generous hearts. So I've read Cheryl Sanders' Lean In. That book was, way too much about women's rights, and it was like, a subject I've heard and, processed. But I love the concept. You lean into your leadership, and her openness to change was incredible. I read a book by Marissa Mayer, who is Yahoo.com CEO. I read a book by Carl Sundberg, who's the new president of Nazarene Theological Seminary recently. I read one by Meg Whitman. I'm trying to think of the name of her book. She's the Hewlett-Packard CEO. And I've really gained some insight about how women lead, and I think it's going to make me a better leader. I think all leaders are learners. Rick Warren says it well. All leaders are learners the moment you stop learning, you stop leading. And so I want to understand diversity of leadership, and let's face it, church boards are now filled with Wesleyan and Nazarene churches and like persuasion groups with women on the board. And I think we found, Kent, that they were most creative as well. So I would add not only openness to change and generous in giving, but also very creative. And there was a time when I was told you need to have all men on your board. Well, the truth is that was wrong then and it's wrong now. I like balance myself. I think that you need some people who think linear and you need people who are the creative sorts. But I would challenge you to do some study, just as I have. I also have gone back and read some Wesleyan classics, B.B. Palmer, and on the list goes. And you can, we're cooperating. Wayne may be able to tell us about this better than I can. I know where you can get it. If you go to Southern Nazarene University's website and click on the Center for Pastoral Leadership, that I'm the new founding director of them, giving them a portion of my time, we have the new Wesley Leaders Library there. And you can download the digital library. And also there's a holinesslegacy.com that right now, holinesslegacy.com, that you can download at least 50 classics free of charge. And so you can read a number of books there that have been written by the early pioneers of the holiness movement and the Wesleyan way. And so what I'm trying to be at this stage of my life, as I'm being reinvented here, per Gene Pauley, is how to be broader in my understanding of how leadership works if I'm going to continue to be a developer of leaders. So it also clarifies the cause, it resources common direction, and it outlives the visionary. Not long ago, I spoke at Liberty University, and there's a lot of Wesleyan Nazarene kids at Liberty University, by the way. The co-founder of Liberty University, Elmer Towns, and I have written 6 books together. Very close friend, very godly man. I like to remind him that he has 3 seminary degrees from Wesleyan persuasion institutions. So that's why he has a framed portrait of John Wesley hanging in his office at Liberty. But he understands us very, very well, and we're very close friends. He's one of my heroes in the faith. But he'd been asking me for years to speak at Liberty. It just never seemed to work out. But I flew out and spoke. You can go to YouTube and put Stan Toler, Liberty University, and hear me preach a message on the power of your attitudes. I talk about at the opening part of that message with 12,000 students at the convocation. I talk about the fact that in 1972, John Maxwell and I got in a beat-up station wagon with 4 other pastors. I was the only staff member in the group and a college student at that. And we chipped in and bought the gas and drove to Lynchburg, Virginia. And they had this first super conference. And Dr. Falwell, in his session, while he was speaking, said, we are going to launch a Christian university here. And he said, one day, this university will have 5,000 students, and we will play Division I sports, and we'll even play Notre Dame in football. Everybody was just looking around going, you started a bottling factory or plant for some off-brand pop, and you're going to build a university. You do know that Liberty is one of the 10 largest universities in the world, not just Christian. I believe that second to Liberty in Christian universities is Indiana Wesleyan University. All due respect to Oklahoma Wesleyan University, which I love and appreciate very much. But it's interesting that Liberty has over 100,000 students, either on campus or online. It really outlives it. In my conversation with Elmer, because I like to ask these kind of questions, I said, how are the sons of Falwell succeeding? And he said, Well, his vision has outlived it. He said, in fact, the church has never had a day like it's having right now. Jonathan Falwell is a very effective pastor that has grown by almost 5,000 since he's been pastor. Interesting. He said, you know, Jerry Jr. is an amazing leader and is doing a phenomenal job at the university. And I found that conversation with a person who was the co-founder of the university, who doesn't get a lot of credit, Elmer Towns, with Jerry Falwell, that he would have that perspective on it. But essentially what he said, and that's where my point came from, it outlives the visionary. You know, when it all started, and I don't know if it was in Milton Dale or Bartlesville or whatever, but when you started adding up Oklahoma Wesleyan University and its story, someone had a vision for it. And when I see all the facilities, I was there recently, I was just in awe of the amazing achievements. I remember when Indiana Wesleyan University was Marion College, and everybody was recruiting me to go there, and I didn't see a lot of growth and progress in Marion, and now they are the town, in my opinion. You know, when you look at it, it's just amazing achievement. So that's the same way in the local church. It always outlives you. So whatever you're dreaming of, God can do you one better. That's the most exciting part that I have to say. So let's read 2 Corinthians 4:18. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. And the one thing I want to remind you of is I believe God guides the life of a believer. And I believe that God guides my life. In every place that I've served, every opportunity that I've had, mystically, wonderfully, He has intervened and guided my life. And so I guess I'm just an old-fashioned mystic in the sense that I believe, and if you're discouraged here today, you need to hear this, that God wants His church to grow. Amen. And what He wants from you is your willingness. I know John Maxwell, but God has used me. And we can look at our limitations, or we can look at who we are in the body of Christ and our successes, our failures, our gift mix, everything that goes with that. And we can be made quite aware that God has created us uniquely and special. And if we will give our hearts and our willingness to Him, the outcome is going to be better than we ever dreamed possible. Now, here's what I think we have to begin to look at in order to capture everything that I've been trying to tell you, and that is we need vision skills. And it begins with the whole concept of being a learning leader and leadership skills. And here's what I want to say to you about the power of personal value. The fact that I'm talking to you now, the fact that you are a leader is not an accident. God has been preparing and building your place of influence since you were born. My challenge to you is to look back over your life for the markers and the landmarks of how God has been preparing you for the service that you're involved in now. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are God's what? Workmanship. Handiwork. Created in Christ Jesus to do what? Good works. God has prepared in advance for you to do. Now, having served on staff with John Maxwell, you come to a really quick conclusion if you understand organizational psychology. I've been through those kind of courses and books and testing and so forth. And In organizational psychology, Blanchard and Hersey, they discussed whether or not is there such an animal as a SNL, a strong natural leader. And my answer is yes. I don't care what the debate is, the answer is yes. Maxwell came out of the womb leading. I mean, if he tells you he's not a strong natural leader, you know.
He's a great liar.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. That was Joe Koloff said that. He didn't say big, he just said great, right? No, but the fact is, he is a strong natural leader. Kent would tell you, my youngest son, Adam, I mean, he had to fight to get in this world, and the kid came out of the womb leading. John Maxwell said, Adam, you're going to be president of one of my companies one of these days. I told John the other day, I said he's the president of his own company. But, you know, the fact is, he came out of the womb leading. Me, I didn't sign up for this. I was 11 years old, my dad's killed in an accident. And my grandmother sets me down and she says, you are the leader of this home. You got two little brothers that you're going to have to be their father. Your mother has had a nervous breakdown. You're going to have to love and care for her. Son, you may have to go get a job. I mean, that's all we knew from West Virginia, you know what I'm saying? And she said, you may have to go to work. I don't even know how you're all going to live, but you are the leader. I don't want to be the leader. Well, you are the leader. So leadership was thrust upon me. I didn't have any choice. Thankfully, God sent a wonderful stepfather into our home later. Mom recovered from the breakdown, and I could go on and on about that, but I want to simply say, I didn't plan on this, and I didn't come out of the womb leading. And so I believe leadership can be learned. And so it's learned behavior with me. I mean, I was minding my own business, and a group of 17 people came to hear me at a youth crusade in Newark, Ohio in the fall of 1966. And afterwards, they stayed and wanted to talk to me. And they said, God has told us you to be our pastor at the church on 32nd Street. And say, what? You know? Roy Ankern was the district superintendent at that time of the Eastern Ohio Wesleyan District, which is now the Greater Ohio Wesleyan District, part of the whole state. Eastern and Western came together. And he did me the nicest favor any district superintendent's ever done for me in my whole career. He said, okay, you can have the kid as pastor, but I forbid you to have a church board meeting for 1 year. That was a blessing. I mean, Mary, how about that? You know, think about that.
Y'all ready for that?
Yeah. I agree, brother. Somebody's getting a witness back here. I'm feeling this. You know, the love is flowing through the room. But no, he said, I want you to ruin this kid. I mean, I was there when he said it. And so you're not having any meetings here. No committee meetings, nothing. Just have church. Well, you know what? God can. Amen. And he used this little kid, and next thing you know, we're running 100, not 17. And, you know, if you ask me today, I couldn't tell you what happened other than God stepped in. But the pastoral leadership was thrust upon me. My mom had a design that I'd be Billy Graham, but I mean, I just don't have the equipment. I don't have the height, the long arms, or the big family Bible, or nothing to go with it, you know. And in that, it solidified in my calling. I've been preaching revival and youth crusade, but my calling was to be the pastor of a local church, and my concern, there's no higher calling. And that's why I passionately want to spend my time encouraging pastors and those who do ministry in Jesus' name, because the action is in the local church. As a denominational leader, I can give oversight and encourage you and facilitate and give you and equip you and so forth. That's what I learned in that role. But my overarching calling has always been the local church. But again, time and time again, when I look back at the life markers, I didn't sign up for it. And most of you did not either. Most of us just don't feel like we have the gift of leadership. Let's be honest, right? But it was thrust upon us. So how do we live it out? And that's what I'm trying to help you with, is that you have some skills. Now, the greatest teaching, in my opinion, that John has ever done is at the bottom of the page. You see it? And it is the 5 levels of leadership. We left off the word leadership. And I will tell you that I'm looking for mistakes, because this is a new teaching. And if you'll give them to me, it'll help me. Just give me a little note or something. There's several that I've found, and that was one of them. You know, there's a place here and there where you got an extra S or a capital. That's just the way it happens. Fortunately, these are very flexible documents. If some of you need this, you know, in a Word document, I'll be glad to send it to you as well, so you can do handouts and teach yourself. But I am very grateful to WIF for paying for these notebooks. They cost $5 a piece, so it was very nice of them to do it, and they've offered to help me anytime I'm teaching a Wesleyan group anywhere with this kind of assistance, and I appreciate it. But this teaching by John on the 5 levels of leadership, if you have not read his new book on that subject, I would challenge you to get it, because I think it brought more understanding to me as a leader than any other teaching he's ever done. And basically what he said is, most people lead from the position level. And people follow you because they have to. You know, I'm the pastor of student ministries, I'm pastor of children's ministries, I'm the lead pastor, whatever. You have this responsibility, and you're, you know, the discipline. 2012 edition for only $5 back there. I have every discipline, including the original in 1968, when the merger of the Pilgrim Homes and Wesleyan took place. Got it when I was 18 years old. Never forget that moment. Still have that copy. Got a little sticker on the inside that reminds me of my church in Newark. And reminds me that the other pastor in that town said there's to be no first churches, and so they were Wesleyan Methodists and we were Pilgrim Holiness. And so we all got to get our names, and so we became the West Side Wesleyan, and then the Cornerstone, theirs has First Wesleyan, but that's another subject. I do have the discipline. He was a 30-some-year veteran, so he outsmarted me. And it's okay. I'm not bitter about it at all. You can tell that. But let me just say that you know, the discipline empowers you to lead in your role, and that's wonderful. And we have what is called the manual, the Church of the Nazarene. I just got the new loose leaf version. It's just come out from General Assembly, and soon it will be a official hardback or leather bound. And you know, you have an empowerment as a pastor, and that's good to know. But you know what? It only works for a few months, and then you better be working to get on the permission level. And this level, John talks about this being the level where people follow you because they want to. They begin to permit you to lead. So one of the reasons I say be a little slow to start making changes quickly, because it takes a while for you to build a relationship bridge with them. The next level is the production level. And people follow you on that level because of what you've done for the organization. During my years at Trinity, I became the longest serving pastor in its history. But what was interesting at Trinity is that when I was VP of John Maxwell's in Joy, and they asked me to be their pastor. And I said, well, I couldn't pastor under your traditional terms of a pastor, because my calling is to teach pastors. And they said, oh, we want to partner with you. You can do that. Well, I said, I don't think you really mean that. Well, I did 2 interims with them, and ultimately I served another 13 years, so most of 15 years I served the church before my election to the general superintendency. But what's interesting is this church had brought people to my workshops and training events, and they had also been aware of the revitalization of Old First Church on the north side of town, where the church ultimately relocated and bought land. And one of the things that I didn't tell you in the story about First Church, by the way, is they came to a point when they were meeting Messiah Lutheran on Northwest Highway, which was 20 miles from downtown. They came to a point where they had a motion on the floor on a Sunday night with 9 people present to close the church. And so that was a significant moment, because one of the seniors stood up and said, God sent us here to do ministry, and I believe what we ought to do is go to that property that we bought here on Northwest Highway and plant a tree and have resolve to see his church flourish and grow again. And they did that instead, and took and tabled the motion, and the rest is history. But Trinity knew that story about me coming there and pastoring, And so they read my books and so forth. And so when I became pastor of that church, they allowed me to go in on the production level. First time in my ministry. Always went in on the position level. Didn't matter where I served, didn't matter what had been accomplished. Always went in on level 1. Even at OKC First, I went in on level 1. They had no idea that I pastored a church that had high days over 2,000 when I was in my 20s. They were a church of 200 and thought they had a lot to teach me. And then they did. And I just waited it out for my opportunity to have opportunity to share with them. But I make the point that Trinity treated me different than any other church I've ever served. Because I wasn't a 17-year-old kid who knew nothing about pastoral ministry. I could go on and on about it. But I went on level 3. And that's a wonderful level to be on. Kent and I were talking about this coming up last night, that one of the pastors, the church in 25-year period, changed pastors every 2.3 years for 25 years. And yet it was a rock-solid church, Trinity. And one of the former pastors who was there for 18 months and went on, all of them got promoted, bigger opportunity. He said to me, he said, Stan, they tell me that when you hired your first staff members, that they said they didn't need a committee to interview, that they just wanted you to pick them and tell them how much they needed to pay them. And he said, is that true? And I said, well, it is true. And he said, that same group wrote me up for buying a computer cable for $37.59 without permission. And I said, that is, I didn't try to explain it to him, but that tells you the story right there in itself, that when you get to that level, then the trust level is a lot stronger. But typically, you don't get it like I did there at Trinity. I always had to earn it, go through the stages. People develop. You know, when you marry and bury and dedicate babies and pour into their lives and give wise counsel and teach and preach and all of that, they grow with you, and when you've invested in them, they will let you lead as never before. And this is the level where you've done things for them. And then, of course, John changed it from personhood to pinnacle level. And I like that a whole lot better, because I didn't see very many people, maybe Bill Bright and Billy Graham could get to those levels, but most of us would never get to the personhood level. But pinnacle leadership is where people follow you because of who you are and what you represent, and that's a respect level. And just remember, if you're thinking about making a pastoral change, that you go back to level 1 every time you make a transition. You're on a church staff somewhere, you go to another church, you go back to level 1. It is just a fact of life. They don't know you that well, they don't have a relationship with you, and this is one of the best lessons that I've ever heard taught on the subject of leadership. And I hope that it's challenged you to remember that the longer you stay, the better chance you have of having a great leadership journey. And it is like the Russian dolls, and it's building, and it's a stackable event, or it's a sequential movie going on, or it's a snowball of activities and momentum. And some of you maybe pastored church 7 or 8 years, and you're wondering, is it ever going to happen? And my answer is yes. I mean, I've watched my brother Mark, who went to a church that was nearly ready to close and facing bankruptcy, and I even questioned his sanity in accepting the church and moving from Woodward, Oklahoma, where he had a very stable church, to come to Edmond, Oklahoma. But when I see what's happened there and the acceptance of 22 years of ministry, then you go, he's paid the price, and people allow him to be on a higher level than you can get on when you're there for a few months or a year and you're trying to implement change or share ideas. They don't get it. And so there's a marvelous, marvelous teaching. The second thing is communication. This is a great statement from Jim Collins here, where he says, great leaders over-communicate. If you've read Good and Great, then you ought to read Great by Choice, which is his newest book. I've read both of them, and they're both unique, but in Great by Choice, he talks about leaders who cast vision are people who communicate very, very well. Now let me give you something that I read the other day. Just below communication skills, you'll see 7 keys to becoming a great communicator. And that comes out of my book, the Inspirational Speakers Resource Book. But I would just highlight that I read an article by John Rogers the other day in Ministry Today, or Outreach Magazine. You get Outreach magazines, I really enjoy it. You learn a lot about what's going on in the church world. But in Outreach Magazine, John Rogers in the last issue wrote an article called Communicate, How You Communicate. Now that's an interesting title right there. Now I have worked from this principle. Informed people are happy people. It took me a few years to figure that out. It's one of the biggest lessons I've ever had to try to, impose and impress upon youth pastors. People just want to know the details. When are the kids going to leave? When are they coming back? How much is it going to cost? What should they be wearing? Blah, 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 blah. It's just a fact. And they want to know. So you've got to over-communicate. Or you're going to have frustration like people. Well, pastors in the same regard. Well, in this article that John Rogers wrote, I love what he said. He said, I was at this church, and the pastor stood up, and he said, I want to tell you how we communicate here at this church. And I thought, well, that's ingenious. I wish I'd have thought of that. Here's how we communicate. First of all, he said, the pastor said, we communicate through the bulletin. Now, you don't want to call it a bulletin, you can call it a worship folder, or whatever you want to call it, but he said, you're going to get all kinds of information through the church bulletin. So, evaluate your communication pieces, and just remember that if you ever take the bulletin away from them, I made that mistake one Sunday. I decided that we were going to have a spiritual renewal, and I didn't hand out a bulletin. Well, I did, but it was blank, and they didn't appreciate it because they didn't know when the softball game was. They didn't know if we were going to have, classes for Weight Watchers that week or whatever it was. It's amazing how it frustrates people when you do that. And I was trying to tell them this was Sunday when we were going to let go and let God have His way. That part worked, but they wanted the bulletin the next week. So bulletin. And then he said, secondly, we communicate through our website. And I thought, well, that's everybody should know that. And here's our website. So he's telling them how he communicates. And I would just say, he mentioned my website, stantoler.com. If you need to send me an email or whatever you need, I answer those myself. Just go to the contact page, and it'll have my personal email there. Come to me, and I'll answer it personally. I've been doing that for years. And my website's under construction. It's going to have podcasts, lots of other things, any day now. I was hoping it'd be up today, the new version of it. So it may be down for a day or two shortly to load it up. Another thing the pastor said, 3, is that we communicate through signage. And I'm a connoisseur of church signs. I love to read what people put on their signs. Fascinating, isn't it? My wife Linda and I were down in South Georgia, where she's from, not long ago. We went to the Carter family reunion, coming around the bend by the Methodist church there, out in the country. And on the sign it said, whoever stole our lawnmower, God will get you. It really told me a lot about that church. For sure, it was a turn or burn church, and highly judgmental. Turn or burn, that's right. If you think this is hot, just wait till, But I mean, you're telling people something. My all-time favorite was out front of a little Baptist church that just said, sign broke, go inside for message. Now, why would you put that in front of your church? I'm going to stop and went and said, what's the message? No, I didn't, but I thought about it. Probably the most unique one was in Oklahoma City not long ago in front of a Nazarene church. and it just said casual worship here. And I looked at that and I said, I think I know what they mean. And I'm okay if you're saying come as you are. But you know, that's an oxymoron, casual worship. Kind of like, jumbo shrimp, healthy tan, good looking old man, Microsoft works, You follow me? Casual worship. You can't worship God casual, You can come casual, but you can't worship Him casual. And so to put that out front, you have to think about what you're saying. Now, we have 44 Nazarene churches, so it's none of your business which one had that sign out there. But I thought, they don't understand what they're saying right now. Because you say passionate worship is what we ought to be about, right? And casual worship, you can take it any direction you want. So when you put it out, you just put John 3:16 out front of the church. And it reminds me of when Tim McCarver said to his sidekick during the World Series, when the guy held up John 3:16, he said, and in all seriousness, that's Tommy John's lifetime ERA. Now, if you don't understand baseball, that won't mean anything to you, but I'm wrong. Now, help me out here. If you're going to put John 3:16, put what it says, for God so loved the world, or don't put it up there. Because you're only talking to believers when you do that. So you're communicating how you communicate. So he says, website, bulletin, signage. And then he said also, we communicate through mailings. And it's going to be snail mail and email. So you're going to get some letters from us, not many. Because, the cost of postage is going up all the time. I'm adding this flavor to it, but it's there. And so you're going to get it. But what I like is getting Wesleyan Life by email. I love the way it's delivered. And it's attractive format. I get the hard copy issue for some reason and appreciate that. Of course, my friend Jerry Breckeisen was managing editor for a long time, and he said to say hello to all the co-laws. It's a new way, and a new way that pastor understood email, snail mail. And then the last way he said we communicate is through verbal announcements and our technology. So you'll come to church, someone will stand up here, and they'll make an announcement. Sometimes it'll be on the video screen, and a lot of churches do this now. I learned a long time ago, if you're going to ask a layman to give a testimony, giving them a time limit doesn't work very well. And one of my worst mistakes was I had like 5 Sundays in a row where I had a lady giving her testimonies, and most of them were supposed to go 3 minutes, would go between 5 and 10, but one guy went 45 minutes. And that was really a downer for everybody because the Baptist beat us to the cafeteria that Sunday. But my point is that technology allows you to edit and to get it right and to have more than one take. And so he was saying sometimes it'll be just a verbal announcement, but it also may be a verbal announcement through technology. Well, I thought, isn't that unique that John Rogers saw that insight and shared it in Outreach Magazine, that you should communicate how you communicate. Ken, I wish I'd known that when we were working together. I would have done that about once a quarter. I would have walked out on Sunday morning in all 3 of our Sunday morning services, and I would say, or I'd have you do it because you were really good at it. Can't make it. I always say, Pastor, don't make the announcement, you'll die from overexposure. I wanted to get up and speak, and if I made announcements, it just dumbed down my message, I thought. So I put Ken up, and he's an amazing guy on his feet, communication-wise. So, but that would have been good for us to do it, wouldn't it? Here's how we do it, so that anybody that's a guest could figure it out. But it's also about vision and so forth. How are we doing on time? It's 11:45, isn't it?
14 minutes.
Yeah, 14 minutes. Let me ask this. I think rather than going this change set, which is next, change skills, I think what I'd like to do is see if you have questions. Is that all right? I'd rather do that than to go into that. And I'll go into this one tonight, make it just a little bit easier, because there's quite a bit of stuff I'd like to say. and I won't do it justice in 14 minutes, so I'd much rather take your questions if you have none. We'll make our announcements, whether they're verbal or technology, and then we'll get out here. Now remember, on the mini iPad mini, you have to be present to win tomorrow, so if you want to communicate, drop those off to Kent if you haven't done that already. There is a book on the table that I did not write, and I'd like to highly recommend to everyone, and it's $5. Is it $5 that particular book? So I just made his now. Okay. It's a hardback by Alma Towns called What is Right with the Church. I really think that's a book that we need to get on the positive here. Too many people are telling us what's wrong with it. We're getting smacked in the press and everywhere else, and it's time that we start talking about all the positives that we have going. Which vision will help you with that. Questions?
When you talked about the 5 levels, is it possible to be on different levels within people in your church?
Oh yeah, I think that's a good question. He asked the question, is it possible to be on different levels with different people in church? That will always be the case because part of it is new people coming in. You know, you've got to build a relationship with them before they understand. And one of the things I found out as I moved through the levels that people at Trinity explained to them my agreement with the church when I arrived, because, you know, I was like, you know, no other pastor. But I did an exercise with them that I learned from Lyle Schaller years ago, you know, what the pastor does and what the congregation does. And we narrowed down their expectations to 3 things. So they were able to dutifully communicate that to new people, that as the church grew, that I was not able to get to because of just the time, distance, and number of people that I could shake hands with on any given Sunday. But yeah, your relationship is different based on how long you've known one another and so forth. And, you know, it's like Kent and I, we worked together so many years that you can just about say one word. It's kind of like the guys that are in jail. One knows how to tell a joke and another doesn't when they call the numbers, you know, because you have that relationship. So, for sure. But I think it's also that way in terms of developing leaders. It's one of the reasons that I truly believe in tenure on the church board and a rotation, because it gave me more opportunity to rotate through people who understood the vision and mission of the church. It was disconcerting at times because I would really get a really quality team together and feel real good about it, and they'd served about 3 years together, and about that time you got to break it up again because we had the 1- and 3-year rotations. But that's the case when you're bringing new leaders into the actual leadership of the church. So, good question. Yes?
Would you give us those 3 things?
Preaching, leadership, evangelism. I could have added a 4th one, but I tended to silent, and that was administration. I'm a structured guy. It's one of the reasons that I'm successful working with people like Maxwell, because I can, you know, I can put details to it if I have to, or I can find the people to do it. Either way, but administration is, and that would tie with leadership. You could say leadership and administration, but I do a conference called Vibrant Church, where I talk about, it's nothing like, in fact, is you got to get Kevin and John's new book, Kevin Myers, John Maxwell's new book, Home Run, if you haven't gotten it already, because Kevin's whole idea about going around the bases is really, really well done. It's great vision casting for everything that I was talking about in terms of strategic priorities, really. And I believe in ministry flow. So I use my 5 ships of ministry and talk about how you got to get all those ships out of the harbor every year if you're going to have a complete holistic ministry going in the church. And then I also always made the point that I never had a year in my ministry when I got all 5 ships out of the harbor. You know, so it makes everybody feel a whole lot better. Guys like Maxwell, they always get them all sailing, but I never was able to get them all out at the same time. You know, it's a leadership issue or something. I have another question. Yes.
Rural setting. How do you change from the city to the rural setting in this concept?
You know, it's a great question. And what I would say is the Lord has prepared me, I think, maybe like no one else for what I do, because I've been a church planter. And anybody that's planting a church or involved in restart or whatever, you get someone who's been with, no people, no property, no money, and you got to out of nothingness do it. I've done that. I've pastored in the suburbs. I've been a downtown church, down at the Titan Stadium, Nashville First Church. So I've been in a urban setting. I've been a freeway church. Trinity was at I-240 in Walker, with really no immediate housing. It was businesses all around it and everything, because they was really bought by a member of the church to put a grocery store there. So we really were sitting right there with banks and car dealerships and everything else, but it's a landmark location when you go by. It's easy to tell people where you are. But I also pastored for 10 years in a county of 25,000 people and a city of 12,000 people in southern Ohio. And having been in a small rural farming community, you have to make those adjustments. What I think there is sequentially the journey is always longer and requires more patience. And what I've taught in Vibrant Church is that the demographics have a lot to do with what you do in a community, and the expectations also change. For example, I'm going to bring Benny Tate in for my pastor's forum in October on purpose in Oklahoma City, because Benny Tate pastors a Congregational Methodist Church, who's part of the Global Wesleyan Alliance, and he's one of the best kept secrets around. But he has 6,000 members in his church, and he's in a community of 700 people. Now, there's a guy that got way beyond the community population, community demographics, and built a great church. So it's easy for me to say, well, if you run 70 in attendance, and you're in a community of 700, you're really on all cylinders, in my opinion. If you have 10% population in any community, I think it's an outstanding achievement. But it takes a slower journey sequentially. I think the frames develop and the edits, everything, if you're following the movie analogy, momentum is slow. But what I will say is, and we were in McAllister, Oklahoma last night, Kent was telling me all about that town and showing me the different things because he's very familiar with it. I said, I love pastoring in a small town. At 10 years, I could run for mayor, I think, and been elected. I'm saying braggadociously. I met people. I was everybody's pastor. When you build a 1,300-seat sanctuary in a community like that, in a 13-acre cornfield, they know you're there. And I'm married more people than ever entered the doors of the church, but gave me many witnessing and soul winning opportunities. So I found it to be one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. It's always much harder in the metropolitan area, to be honest with you, because connecting to the community was the hardest job.
Right.
So now I have 3 words that I'll throw out to you in answer to that apply to any community that you might be serving in as you lead and minister. The first word is listening. The second word is reflecting. And the third word is acting. Listening, reflecting, acting. Listen to your community. Ask good questions. Get to know them. First thing I do in a small community is find where they all drink coffee and be there every morning if I could. And that's what I did at Washington Courthouse, Ohio. I knew everybody in town by the time I'd been at church in 2 years, just about as any leadership role. And I listened. I reflected on it. And then, and I did the same thing at Trinity, Freeway Church. Everybody in all those shops knew me. I knew them. And I could ask them anything and learn a lot about the community. And I'd reflect on it and say, now how are we going to act on this? What are we going to do? So, because when you focus on basic needs, you're always needing. Because what happens is you find the nerves. And probably the thing that helped me most on those 3 words was, most people don't know this, but when my parents found out that I was going to be a minister, they said, what are you going to do for a living? Our pastor was a coal miner and a pastor. And so Claire Parsons, Roger Parsons' dad, encouraged the 2 of us to go to Ohio State Bible College where he was president. I became the youngest person to ever go to Ohio State Bible College at age 16. And I remain a certified master barber in the state of Ohio. So I always tell my church, you mess with me, I got work. But in the barber shop, you listen, you reflect, and you act. You listen, you reflect, and you act. Some barbers didn't listen, they didn't have long careers. You know? But I have a lot of clients, and that's why I did the book, Terrific, on customer service. I feature 5 Down syndrome adults who work in the marketplace and give excellent customer service. A.J. Hoffman, Green Bay Packers, did the forward on the book, because I wrote about his Down syndrome aunt, Kim, that I dedicated as a baby, who also, which was 30 years of age, passed from this life. I preached her funeral. I've had a fascination with customer service since I worked in the barbershop. And we're in it in church, like it or not, you know that. We better know how to serve people or we're out of business in a hurry, aren't we? And I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Okay? It was a path to rural America, which I love. Okay? Someone else. It's about time to call to it. I think they've had enough, and I don't blame them. Hey, you're great. I hope you've had a good morning. Marion, come and tell us what we're going to do next.
We will look forward to this evening at 6:30, lunch in the next room over. Before you get up and leave, we do want to phone call